Welcome to Max Potential, the podcast that takes you on a journey of professional and personal growth. Each week, we chat with leaders, innovators, and visionaries who share their secrets to success. Max Potential is meant to be your go-to resource for actionable insights and inspiring stories. Today with me, I have Lindsey Light, owner of the LL Group Marketing. And we are super excited to have you, Lindsey, here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, to start off, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So, as you said, Lindsay Light with LL Group Marketing. Started LL Group Marketing about, oh gosh, it's been about a year and a half now. Before that, I spent what feels like a billion years as a account executive and sales consultant and digital marketing expert for several different companies, and then made the decision to kind of branch out and do my own thing. But I also work in very close partnership with the wonderful Emma Monroe, who is the CEO and founder of Found and Chosen. Our primary kind of specialty is account-based marketing. So that is kind of our wheelhouse, and she has an incredible framework for account-based marketing. So I get to parlay the experience that I have in sales and digital marketing to be a sales enablement coach within the ABM framework with Found and Chosen and LL Group Marketing in close partnership. So it's a really, really cool position to get to be in.
Very cool. And does that mean you get
Yeah.
to help different people with their marketing strategies in what you do? Very neat.
Yeah, I get to toe the line. It's a really great way to um, combine the experience that I've had both on the sales side and the marketing side. So I found that in my years as both a sales executive and a marketing consultant, I originally thought, well, maybe I want to kind of focus on one of those things and not have to wear so many hats. So I jumped
Mm,
ship and I jumped into a primarily sales focused role. And then, of course, I got into that role and I thought, well, I kind of miss being able to be a problem solver and I sort of miss being able to be a consultant. And so I learned a lot about myself in that time frame where I stayed in one lane. And so this allows me to get to do both, but from more of a consultative perspective. So I get
mm.
to be the problem solver, consultant and strategist from a marketing perspective, but I also
Okay.
get to be the sales enablement coach and tap into, how are we going to capitalize on what we're seeing from a data perspective, and use that from, the sales angle, and how are we going to use that in our outreach and be better salespeople using that data. So I get to kind of do both of those things and, you know, use all of that history, but from more of a kind of coaching strategist angle, which is really unique and really, really fun.
I was going to say that sounds really, really fun. That's probably the part about marketing I like the best is taking the data and then being able to drive
Mhm.
some sort of business outcome that you can actually see,
Exactly. Yep,
which is
totally.
really, really neat. So
Yeah.
that's what we do today.
Mhm.
I always like to ask people who come on, what was your first job ever? And is there one thing that you learned from that job that you still use today?
First job ever. Okay. Well, okay. So first job ever was
Ever.
probably when, well, so if we're talking like off the books, this was probably when I like got myself in trouble and my mom like yanked me down to her law firm and made me be a file clerk for like a week. I was like 13. And truly, I did actually learn a lot from that. I mean, all the collating. Like, truly, I did learn a lot about organization and just the intricacies of kind of the legal world.
Mm,
I probably did that for a couple weeks. On the books, though, the first job that I had was being a hostess at a very well-established restaurant in Colorado Springs. And
mm.
truly, I mean, On certain days, there were days that were not very different than a couple scenes out of like The Bear. Like, no,
Oh,
no doubt.
wow.
So yeah, and as like a an impressionable 14-year-old, that taught
Yeah.
me how to have a pretty thick skin early
Wow.
on. Like things physically flying across the kitchen often.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah, like you could slap the original beef sign on the front of that restaurant and it
It
was
was,
pretty simple.
that's too funny. I feel
Mhm.
like for me, I've watched that show and I'm like, I love that there's a level of excellence, but I'm like, working in that environment is probably extremely intense.
Oh, 100%. Like I had actual flashbacks watching that show as a 14-year-old. Like up front, just like kind of hunkering down, like, is this for real? And it is. It's real.
That is too funny. So you've got
Yeah.
real world experience there.
Yeah. So yeah, the skin had to toughen up pretty quick.
And that's a good lesson to learn, I think, in general.
Mhm.
It's not how to not take things personally,
Oh yeah.
and detached because oftentimes someone else's crazy is just coming from their own stress versus,
Oh yeah,
it being
100%
personal
because
to you. But when you're that young, it's, you're
oh
very
yeah, you have no
impressionable
idea
and
if it's
yeah.
like you think you absolutely messed up big time. To everybody else up front at the front of the house is like, no, no, it's okay. It's
I,
not you. It's not you. And you're like,
like, are you sure? Well, I mean, that's a great lesson to learn. I feel like that's one of those ones that, once I was able to kind of understand that, it made it a lot easier to work in a lot of different places. Though I still think you have to kind of figure out what's the right culture and vibe for you.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. So yeah.
so what did you want to be when you grew up? And do you do that today?
Well, so it's funny because um because my mom worked in the legal field for so long, I was fairly convinced that I wanted to be a lawyer. Um
Mm.
for a very, very long time. And I do think it was partially because she was in that world, but it also is maybe because I am a fairly analytical and methodical and potentially argumentative person. At least that's what friends and family members would
Allegedly.
say about me. Um, but no, I really do. I think that just my tendencies toward those things
Mm.
um are still a part of me and my analytical, I think, skill set and just my sort of type A brain are maybe what drove me to think that that was a field that I would thrive in. And I thought that for a really, really long time. Um, and I still think that that is something that I could probably do. I'm
Mm.
glad I didn't. But it is where I thought I would probably end up.
And at what point did you decide like you were not? I mean, because being a lawyer is like, I feel like you have to commit kind of early on that. You got to think about
Mhm.
law school and
Yep.
got to back that into your bachelor's degree and you got to back that out. Like it's something that I think you have to think about. Like for me, being an art history major was kind of like I decided my sophomore year. I was like, this
Yeah.
looks good.
Yeah, I like how that sounds.
I like art, right? But I didn't really have a vision for myself other than like I just want to enjoy life, right? Where like I had a dear friend and she wanted to be a lawyer from like day one. She was like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
be a lawyer. I watched her go
Mhm.
through law school. I watched all of that. I was like, oh my God. And then she's a lawyer today. So
Yeah.
when did your path vary on that?
It varied when I really couldn't decide what kind of law I would want to do.
Mm,
I for years I thought about, well, what would I want to do? Would I want to do family law? No, I can't handle that. I would be
mhm.
way too emotional for that. Would I want to do defense? No. I think I would feel like there were times when I couldn't back that up. Would I want to do, so there were just always
Uh,
reasons why I didn't feel like I would be able to see that path through with the conviction that I would need to have.
Yeah, I get that. It's funny. I was an art history major, right, as I mentioned. And when I ultimately got out of school, when I looked at all the career paths, I had a kind of similar thing. I was like, I don't want to sit in a gallery by myself all the time. I don't want to
Mhm.
be an archaeologist like digging. Like I
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
was like I'm like, so what do I do with this degree? And then I'm much more a people person, so I ended up getting into recruiting. So
Yeah.
it was like completely different thing, but it was the way you thought about it, like, okay, so if you get this, the true day-to-day of this, right, would be this, this, and this. And does that align to like what you would want to spend your days doing, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Yeah. It's like I think we're similar in this way. Like we're very outcome focused.
mhm.
And so it was like, well, what do I want the outcome of this to be? And if there isn't really a very clear answer, it's like, okay, well, then I'm just not, I don't know if I'm ready to go that direction if I'm not. I mean, it's okay to go a direction without knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be, but to make that kind of a commitment, I wasn't really ready to do that.
Felt the same way about I felt like I was gonna have to be like not making a lot of money for a long time as an art history
Mhm. Yeah.
field. And I was like, I love it. I just don't love it that much. And
Yeah.
I have friends who did. They went and got their PhDs. They've been, living on
Mhm.
like shoestring budgets for a long time. And I'm like, all power to you. Great for you. But it was for me,
Mhm.
I was just like, I don't love it that much to get to
That
that.
is exactly how I think of things in that terms. Like if I am even like looking at a pair of jeans, if I'm like, well, do I $300 love them or do I $50 love them? Like,
It's such
like
a good,
for
yes, it's
real,
such a
yeah.
good.
And so I'm like, like educationally, do I $300,000 love it? Do I like 100? I mean, you have to like ask your, do I love it that expensive or do I love it that expensive?
No, that is a great, I think, barometer to use, right? Because there are things that you
How
like,
committed are you? Like,
right? Because I'll tell you what,
how literally invested are you?
right? Like I remember I wanted to go to Thailand the year after I graduated college, and I was committed to that. Somehow
You're
I
like,
found the money,
that's
the time
that
off,
it. Yeah.
and I was there. So
Yeah.
I was just like, if I really wanted to do this, I could have made it work,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it
See?
just didn't quite make it.
But if you ask yourself that and the answer is yes, then you know that
And
that's the right answer. Hmm.
yeah, and I feel like for me, I it took me a long time to kind of get an idea for like what I want to do when I grow up. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like there's some people that
Yeah.
were like really clear on that. And I love there's that song, the sunscreen song that says some of the most interesting people are the people that still don't know what they want to
Yeah.
do,
Right?
right? With their
So
life
true.
kind of a thing. But I
It's
do
so
feel like
true.
as I've gotten older, I've gotten a better idea of it. But for the majority of my like college coming out of it, it was just kind of like, well, I like this, I like that, and just kept
Mhm.
rolling to where the next thing takes you as opposed to being super prescriptive, which has taken me on a lot of different paths,
Yeah.
which it sounds like you as well in terms of where things weave
Oh,
and
100%. I would never have guessed that I'd be where I am now.
yeah.
Ever. I really couldn't have guessed anyway, but I wouldn't have guessed this.
Which I wish I could sometimes go back to my like 20-year-old self and be like, just relax. Like
Yeah, chill. It'll happen.
it's all gonna work out. Just
Yeah.
keep trying things and like you literally don't need to know it as much as you think you'd need to know it. Because I feel like
Oh
I
my
stressed over
gosh.
that for a while. It's like, what was my major gonna be? What was my life gonna be? And it was like, some of the things I never imagined are far more interesting than I could have imagined originally.
I have that song in my head. I wish that I knew then what I know now.
Yes,
It's ugh,
it's a good song.
only
I know.
so
Uh,
funny.
Switching gears a little bit, tell me about a time where you took a risk and it paid off for you, either career,
Actually,
personal. Yeah.
this parlays perfectly into what we were just talking about because um odd I don't know if I told you this story. Um in my my previous role with my kind of first roles in marketing, I was with that company for a really, really long time. I did many roles there. I was very comfortable there. I was super thrilled with the team that I was working with there. Like, I don't know what it was ever really going to take to get me to move
Mm,
away from that company. And um and you always kind of wonder, like, what's the catalyst really going to be? Because in those times in your life, you kind of dabble with, well, am I ever going to leave here? What's it going to be? What's it going to take? But there's never really, like, at least for me, there wasn't any big driver. It was
mm,
comfortable. I knew everybody. I loved everybody. There were things that really made me unhappy, but there were things that made me really happy. And so I feel like I could probably have just stayed there for a long time. And I don't know what I would be doing. I think I just would have been on a pretty, um, kind of potentially mediocre pathway there.
mm.
So all that to say, the thing that did it, I kid you not, was tomato sauce.
Okay, I have
I
to hear.
stay with me. So my husband at the time was the food buyer for Sierra, part of the TJX family of brands. He's been a buyer of all kinds of different categories there, and was working with the CFO of a recruitment for a recruitment marketing firm where you and I met.
Hmm.
Um, but he was working with the CFO on his passion project, which was this wonderful tomato sauce brand that he was building up. And so they were working together on getting the tomato sauce into Sierra stores.
Okay.
And they started talking about his day job, which was the CFO of this marketing agency, who needed a few sales executives. And
Ah.
Brent, my husband, brought me up. The CFO was, saying, well, we're kind of looking for XYZ. I'd be happy to make an introduction. That is how that happened. I just don't think I would have left my current company if my husband hadn't met the CFO of this other company and about the tomato sauce and made the introduction to the SVP at the recruitment marketing firm, where I ended up leaving my current company to go be a VP of biz dev at this other company. So I explored this other position, this other opportunity. It ended up being a great opportunity, one that I could not turn down. Everyone at my other company was very supportive, and it was the catalyst. It was the thing that just got me to go in a different direction, and it felt very risky because I
Mm.
just was I was comfortable.
Yep.
I didn't know what the future held. And that was, so I mentioned this earlier, that was the time in which I stepped away from the dual role of sales and marketing, where I didn't actually realize how unique that was because I'd been doing it for so long, and stepped
Mm.
into a singular role of just sales, where I realized how much I missed being a marketing consultant as well, which is then where I decided to step into this role, which also felt very risky. To say, okay, well, maybe now I need to risk building something of my own. So two fairly kind of big steps, like within a short time frame, all because of tomato sauce, which sounds insane, but it really is because of this, very, very unique conversation that was happening that had nothing to do with me, that just presented this opportunity that presented itself. So
It's
I
funny
know.
how in life it's sometimes those small
Mhm.
moments that can trigger. like a whole lot
Yeah.
of other things.
And I
I would
think it's
also,
just how
yeah,
you have to listen. You have to listen for it.
yes, that is an amazing point. I feel like one thing I do now when I have to make a big decision is I don't make a decision unless,
Mhm.
I have to, but like I kind of turn it over and I'm like, all right, universe, like send me that signal,
Right?
right? Like send
Yeah.
me the signal, but to your point, you have to be open to like
Yeah.
receiving the signal, right? Like that, okay, when the time comes. And then I think having the courage to do something different. So you were presented the opportunity, but it was still you who said, okay, I'm going to take this chance, walk away from exactly what I know, what's safe and comfortable, and like take a risk for that growth. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's, I would say, that's what I feel like I hear from your story was an appetite still, though, even though you were comfortable for a while, to take a risk when it did. You could have been like, I'm not going to go down this road, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's the risk factor for sure.
Yeah.
But it does, sometimes it doesn't pay off, sometimes it does. But I think being comfortable, or maybe if not comfortable, at least willing to accept that there will be times where it doesn't. But adding those, notches um, to your belt as accomplishments, even
Mm.
when they don't necessarily go the direction that you want them to go, because we still learn, we still grow. Growth really does happen outside of our comfort zones.
Hmm.
Uh, so, I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think the learning like builds on itself.
Yeah.
So even if it doesn't work out, like
Yeah.
there's one or two career moves I've made, and very quickly after been like, this was a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I shouldn't be here, but now I'm here, and I'm gonna have to navigate it through. But I still feel like each one of those pieces. I remember I took a job in the city when I was really early on, and I didn't do the math right, and I ended up making less money than I had in the previous job. And I was like, okay, I didn't get that right, but I that had opened me up to like fashion and like when you're in New York City, like I'm from Connecticut, you can see like all these different people dressing all these different types of ways. And it just like opened this door for me that like I then wove into, I came from art history. So fashion was also a cool piece of the puzzle that was like, I had no idea. So I only stayed at that job for a short period of time, but it opened my eyes and gave me something else,
Yeah.
that kind of has been useful as I've gone down the road. So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I feel like
Totally.
every time you learn, you can put that like in your bag, and then that's one more thing you have to where you continue to keep going.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
so
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the position that I was in with the company that I moved to after my long-standing career, um, it wasn't something that I was in for very long, but I value that like wholeheartedly, because that's where I met Emma Monroe, who I
mm,
am now in close partnership. That's where I met you. That's, these
yeah,
are big time relationships that I have been able to build, and huge skill sets. And so I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
yeah, I love
So
that.
yeah, absolutely.
So, for your life, do you have a set of values and a vision for yourself, your life, and your career?
Yeah, I mean, the couple immediate, it's like almost like word association, right? Like the immediate words that come to mind for me, especially after kind of trying to really build something of my own, are, quality, authenticity, and balance.
Hmm.
Um, those for me are really at the epicenter of everything that I set out to accomplish on a daily basis, but really just as a whole. Um, because at at the heart of everything that I do for not only my business, but for my life in general, for my personal relationships, for my professional relationships, but especially for myself, I
Mm,
want to maintain quality of life. I want for there to be, you know, quality in the relationships that I build, quality in the communication that I have, quality
Mm.
in the professional endeavors that I take on, quality in the interactions that I have. And I try to prioritize those. So when I find that I'm kind of, going down a road that is less than, I just try to put a little bit less in that bucket if I can.
Mm.
So, and I just try to recognize that, and I try to just prioritize a little bit differently when I can. Authenticity is something that is really, really important to me, especially now that we are kind of, getting into this part of our lives where, honestly, where we get to, where we get, where it's honestly, at this time in my life, it's like, I've spent enough time, kind of catering or
Mm.
living up to the expectations of others.
Yep.
And it's not to say that I just won't do that. I will still certainly try to be accommodating, but I am more committed to being authentic to myself than not anymore. So
I love that. I love that. More committed to yourself than
yeah,
not.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is the lion's share of the way that I will interact with the world around me um, than it has ever been. So I will not be malleable in that anymore, the way that maybe I had in my life prior.
Yeah.
And
And
then honestly, doing those things brings me the balance. So that's kind of the third piece.
yeah, I think that's so important. And I do think it's earned that one, you got to know who you are, right? Which,
Mhm.
I feel like that's a lot of what like the younger years are like figuring out like who you are,
Yeah,
what matters to you. But then
right.
there's you get to that place and you kind of know, but then you end up in situations where you're like, this really doesn't feel good, or like it doesn't feel right
Right.
to me, or doesn't, and it's small ways and big ways, but then learning how to like scope out like, okay, like if this is who I am, then there are 100 different options in life. Like if it doesn't align with these values that are most important to me, uh, make a different decision. And I feel like I've leaned into in my as I feel like you get to as you get older into value-based decisions, which has actually it's funny because once you take the upfront work and really know what they are, it makes it so much easier to
Yeah,
like decide things. Like I remember being very indecisive too. Like, what do I want? And it's like, well,
right.
now I can run it through my values. Does it hit this? Does it hit this? Does it hit that?
Yeah.
Because likelihood is if it hits those things, then I'll be happy with that choice. Right.
Yeah.
So,
It will serve us differently. It will serve our lives. It will serve then the people around us,
mhm.
who we love and care about and who we are, responsible for. And, so yeah, just a different way of living and prioritizing.
Yeah, um, absolutely. And I have found that to be unbelievably freeing.
Mhm. Yep. Yep, exactly.
And you can choose your journey, right? There's all sorts of journeys, right? So it's like, do you want to be a lawyer? Do you want to be, for me, I
Yeah.
also have, balance and flexibility in my world because I always think like I don't want success at the price of my family.
Mhm.
Some people
Exactly.
they want the success at all costs, and that's not all costs, but like that's the thing that matters the most to them. I've decided I have a little bit different vision for my life and
Yeah.
how I want
Yeah.
it to go.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, can you share any life hacks that you feel like have improved your overall well-being that might be helpful for our listeners to know?
Life hacks. Uh, well, again, a couple, a couple come to mind. I don't know if these are life hacks so much as like type A neuroses. Um, yeah, a couple. Number one, I make my bed every single day. Like,
Ooh,
I
I
will
love
not make my bed. It sets me up to have an entirely different kind of day if I make my bed than if I don't.
mm.
Like, psychologically, organizationally, I will not make my bed for anything. I seriously, like, every room of my house is cleaner because of it. I feel more organized in my office because of it, which then parlays into the way that I do my job. It parlays into the way that my daughter sees like organization as a whole.
Mm.
I'm telling you, making the bed is a thing. Um, Another one that I do is, and again, this may just be like type A crazy, but I set timers for myself like
Mm.
all day, especially in the morning. So like if I'm, well, just throughout the morning and a little bit throughout the day, I'm constantly talking to the devices around me, which I won't say the names of because they'll talk back right
Yes.
now. But I'm like asking what time it is, and then I'll say, okay, set a timer for 5 minutes, and then I'll do the thing that I'm working on for that amount of time, or set a timer for 10 minutes and I'll do the thing that I'm working on for that amount of time. And then that way I know that I'm like time stamping my morning so that I know
Mm.
how much, like how it's just the way that I am able to take like control of that time frame and stay on task and stay like, ahead of the curve. And
Mhm.
again, especially in the mornings because is the only way that I'm able to get us all out the door in like one piece. But then even during the day, if I've got, a particular project that I'm working on, I just set a timer for, I'll give myself 30 minutes to work on it or an hour to work on it. And I will just like head down. That's what I'll do for that amount of time. So timers are a big one for me.
Okay,
Um,
timers. Yep.
yeah. And then it kind of that really ties into the third one, which is that for me, it just makes a huge difference in my life to be on time.
Mm.
Just be on time.
Why is that?
This, again, for me, I get very anxious if I'm not on time.
Mm.
I hate it if I'm late. The feeling of being late just makes me feel like I have valued my time over someone else's.
Mm.
And look, things happen. Like things absolutely happen. You cannot always be everywhere. Like it will happen. But if you are just a perpetually late person, um, I think, it can ultimately send the message that you are valuing your time over someone else's.
Mm.
So I am, I just try to be on time. But that I'm not even all that. I just find that it keeps me, again, flowing through my day better. It's
Mm.
not really as much about the imprint that I'm leaving elsewhere. It's more just an internal, like, I feel like it's a propellant for my day, to just, again, probably because of the timers. See, I told you it's like type A. I don't know if these are hacks that anyone should, maybe like others should make the bed. Maybe these are terrible hacks for other people. But yeah,
No, no,
these are
no.
things.
There's some speech out there by like a general in the army who swears by making your bed in the morning too, as like a
I'm telling you,
productivity thing, saying that if you get one accomplishment under your belt for the day, it sets off a chain reaction of like a positive thing. So
I genuinely believe that the making the bed and then these little, like, even if it's just like, if I can't figure out what to wear, I'll give myself 5 minutes in my closet. Like, no more than that. Like, stop perseverating over which pair of jeans to wear.
Yes, perseverating. That's a good word. But yes, I love that. And I think I also think sometimes too being on time or being thoughtful and planned out for what you're doing, I have found has cut down on the drama in my life, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like I look at everything now more like mental energy sucks
Yeah.
or lights, right? Like, is this giving me energy or is this taking energy from me as I
Yeah.
try to balance my day? Like, right? Like, I'm like you, I have a family, I have a job, I work out, like fitting these all into one day, there's like only so much
Yes.
energy and time that fits in one 24-hour period.
Yes.
So for me, I'm like, if I spent like all that anxiety, got my heart rate up, I'm running to the thing, I'm feeling bad that I'm late, like that whole thing is like a negative energy impact on me.
See, exactly.
If I show up on time and I'm feeling good and relaxed, I feel like that's a positive energy imprint
Mhm.
on my day. And that I take that very, very seriously now in terms of
Yeah.
like, because there's so not a lot of leftover that I like, I'm like, I don't can't be wasting time on things that aren't, feeding into something better. So
Yep. Yep.
I'm with you
It
on
was, yeah.
that.
I do have to, I will say that in the event that you are not, you as a whole can't, be on time or things aren't going your way, giving ourselves grace is definitely important. I had a day this week where we were absolutely not on time. It was the very first time in the 3 years that my daughter has been in school where we had to go in through the office because we were not on time. And I had to tell myself, I was in my head all morning saying, this is not an emergency. This is not an emergency. It is okay. We can go in through the office. It's not an emergency. And I had to talk myself down off of the ledge in like very real terms. So
I
giving
I can
grace.
relate to that. Ironically enough, this week I also, for the first time, dropped my daughter off late and I had to go through the doors.
Oh my gosh.
And I had the same thing. I'm like, it's all right. Like she's almost always, I'm always at the bus stop. I'm always like, we're always very, very programmed. And I just like the way the week had gone, I had just given myself some grace to spend some more time with a dear friend. And it meant we were late. And I was like, you know what? When I zoom out, I need to let this go. She's gonna get her
Yes.
education.
Mhm.
She's still going
Yep.
to school. Then I got the little email like tardy. I'm like, oh, but I'm like,
Oh,
right? But to your point, like having grace that like perfection, it's progress over perfection, right? That means
yeah.
like perfection is
Yes.
often I've heard it called a form of like self-hate if you're being trying to be perfect,
Mhm.
perfect, right?
Yeah.
So I
There's no
think it's
such thing.
balancing. You
Yeah.
don't want to be a chronic late person, but having the understanding that like sometimes life's just going to flow and if you can do it with grace and ease, you get,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
keep on trucking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Keep the scales, balanced as well as you can and do give yourself grace for sure.
I love that. Any last advice for our listeners on how you think they can think about maximizing their own potential or their own lives, just in general?
Yeah, honestly, this is gonna sound potentially cliche, but just get out of your own way. Get out of your own way. And even if it's just on a subconscious level,
Mm,
um, stop telling yourself that what you want isn't out there or
mm.
doesn't exist or that you can't have it
Oh, I love that.
because
I love
it
it. Yeah.
is and it does and you can.
Oh,
So get out of your own way.
get out of your own way. I love that. Such a great, and there are definitely times in my life where I have gotten in my own way. And I think
Yep. Same.
it, and I think learning for me, an unlock for me was big dreams. Dreams
Mhm.
are dreams are free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why
Right.
are you gonna dream small? I
Yeah.
think people are like, "Oh, well, you're never gonna get that." It's like, it doesn't matter. If I get
Mhm.
even twice as much as what I originally thought was
Yeah.
possible,
Right.
I won.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
yeah.
Just this morning, my husband and I were sitting having coffee and talking about kind of our pathways, and he said, well, I don't think XYZ is going to happen in this time frame. And I just said, you've said that to me before. Why? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, I think it's time that you remove those blockers. You
Mm,
don't know that. And I said, look, even if it doesn't have to be in the short term,
right.
but you don't know that. Just let that go. Just let it go.
Yeah.
There's no reason to think that. There's no reason to believe that. You have no reason. Just put it down.
Yeah. I I think we put up our own limits,
We do.
and it comes
Because
from, like,
it's
a
just
fear-based place, I think,
Mhm.
right? It's, like, coming from fear, but we can put our own limits and make our dreams small, all on our own,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. hmm
And
Yeah.
I think that's a mistake, and it's funny, you can do it almost, like, unconsciously. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like my boyfriend will call me out on that sometimes, like, "Why do you just want, like, this nice car? You could dream for a great car. You could have a Tesla, like, why not? Maybe you
Yeah.
can't afford it today, but why would you limit the dream?" And I
Yeah.
can catch myself on that, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, not to be a cheese ball, but like manifesting is a thing for a reason. Like, don't limit yourself. Just don't do it. There's no reason to limit yourself.
I love that. Don't limit yourself. Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining
Thank
us.
you
So
for
many great
having me.
nuggets today. Uh, Please tell the listeners where they can find you if they would like to connect with you for life or potentially business and marketing.
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, just under personal Lindsey Light. You can find the LL Group Marketing profile on LinkedIn as well, or just llgroupmarketing.com.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much.